Good morning, good evening to all participants. My name is Daniela Costa and I'm the OIV Press Officer. It is a great pleasure, along with the OIV Director General, Mr. Pau Roca, and my colleagues Solange Slack from the Communication Department, Giorgio Del Grosso, Krisha Gandhi from the Statistics Department, to receive you to this OIV Web Press Conference. As usual, at this time of the year, our Director General presents the first estimates of the world wine production. As in a regular press conference, the presentation will be followed by a questions and answers part, which will be explained at that time by Solange Slack. The press files are going to be shared in the chat that you see on your screen. And also note that these files are going to be translated in the OIV official languages very shortly. But with the exception for the OIV PowerPoint presentation that will be available exclusively in English. You may also see below a small icon for the questions and answers. And we invite you to participate already and write your questions in that questions and answers icon. You may also vote for the questions you consider the most relevant. If you are participating by YouTube live streaming, know that you can also send your questions on the chat that you see on the right corner of your screen. And now, to start his presentation, please welcome the International Organization of Vine and Wine Director General, Mr. Pau Roca.
Thank you, Daniela. Welcome to this press conference that we hold annually. And today I will present, so we do this normally in the month of October. I will present the estimates of the world wine production in this very special year of 2020. And before starting, I would like to highlight that the first data I am going to show you refers to wine production exclusively. So this is excluding musts and juices. Secondly, data on 2020 and 2019 are still preliminary and provisional, respectively, and therefore potentially subject to changes. As you know, for official statistics, it takes between 2 or 3 years to be consolidated. Lastly, today's presentation will mainly include countries with an expected wine production of more than 1 million hectoliters. This is the structure of today's presentation. I will start with the estimate of the 2020 world wine production and will then proceed on the analysis of the regional and country level. I will start with the Northern Hemisphere, where estimates are based on harvest data with the last vines being harvested in the last few weeks. And then we move to the Southern Hemisphere, where the data tends to be more reliable, given that the harvest takes place in the first semester of the year. Given the very particular circumstances of this year, I will also share with you some insights of the COVID-19 pandemic and the wine sector, what we have learned so far, and what are the challenges ahead. Before going into these details, at its major producing countries, let's start with the estimate for the world wine production in 2020. Based on the information collected on 30 countries, which represents 84% of the world production in 2019, 2020 world wine production excluding, as I said, juices and musts, is estimated between 2054 and 2062 million hectoliters, with a mid-range estimate at 2058 million hectoliters, a level in line with the 2019 crop of plus 1%. At the exceptionally and after the exceptionally high production of 2018, we expect for the second consecutive year a production volume that can be defined as below the average, taking the average of the last 20 years being at 2,070 million hectoliters. This is not necessarily bad news for the sector, given the current context where wine stocks are still relatively high and geopolitical tensions, climate change, and COVID-19 pandemic are generating a high degree of volatility and uncertainty in the global wine markets. Now let's move to the first estimate of the Northern Hemisphere. We start with the evolution of the EU 27 wine production, which today represents around 62% of the world wine production. The production volume this year is estimated at 159 million hectoliters, about 5% more than in 2019. This is an annual increase of 7 million hectoliters compared to last year. This year, good weather conditions favored a potentially large harvest. This has been mitigated by different measures at both government and producers associations level, aiming at containing the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on the wine market. Let us now see in more detail the situation at country level. Here is the evolution of the three larger producing countries, Italy, France, and Spain, which together account for 49% of the world production and 81% of the EU production. This year, with respect to 2019, there is a drop of minus 1% in Italy with 47.2 million hectoliters, slight increase of 4% in France with 43.9 million hectoliters, and a large rise of more than 11% in Spain with 37.5 million hectoliters. It should be noted, however, that all three countries show preliminary levels of production for this year that are lower or just below their last 5-year averages. This is the result of a combination of overall favorable weather conditions and the applications of measures such as green grape harvesting. Also, in certain regions, winemakers decided to fix the vinified volumes at a level inferior to that of last year because of the drop in demand on the global wine market. At the bottom of the slides, you can see percentage changes with respect to 2019 in red and with respect to the last 5 years average in gray. Moving to the other large producing countries in the EU, the situation is more heterogeneous. A positive growth with respect to 2019 is recorded in other large EU producing countries such as Germany with 8.9 million hectoliters, that is an increase of 8%, and Hungary with 2.9 million hectoliters with an increase of 22% respectively to the last year, and Austria with 2.7 million hectoliters with plus 10%, and showing that production levels are in line with or even above the last 5 years average. Portugal, with 6.5 million hectoliters in 2020, is in line with its production of last year and with the last 5 years average. Romania, with 3.6 million hectoliters, and Greece, with 2 million hectoliters, show a negative variation with respect to 2019, -7% and -2% respectively. Now let's have a look at other major producing countries that are still in the Northern Hemisphere, but outside the EU. In the USA, the preliminary estimate for wine production is at 24.7 million hectoliters. So that's an increase of 1%. This figure is based on US Department of Agriculture forecast on wine grape harvest, and it could be significantly revised downwards in the coming months when more information on the real effects of the wildfires in Napa and Sonoma will be available. In fact, complications from fire and smoke taint may prevent part of the grapes being vinified. And also the oversupply issue that characterized the last 5 years, few years might play a role in wine production decisions. As always, at this time of the year, data on grape harvest in China is not yet available. However, wine production is likely to continue contraction started in 2016 for the structural reasons outlined during my last press conference last April. So I will not make any comment on it. And in Russia now, the 2020 wine production is high in countries like Russia with 4.7 million hectoliters, with a 2% increase, and Ukraine with 1 million hectoliters with a plus 1%, while Georgia and Moldova, hit by the drought, record a contraction in production with 1.7 million hectoliters, minus 3%, and 1.2 million hectoliters, minus 18% respectively. Wine production volume in Switzerland in 2020 with 0.9 million hectoliters is expected to be 10% smaller than last year. Now we move to the Southern Hemisphere, where harvest ended in the first half of 2020, and thus preliminary figures on wine production tend to be more accurate and reliable in this period of the year. It is worth mentioning that the COVID-19 pandemic spread during the harvesting regions, the harvesting season, even though this does not seem to have impacted much the volumes of production, what had a strong impact in the climatic conditions, which led lower levels of wine productions. We saw it already. So here is the evolution of the Southern Hemisphere over the last 20 years. As you can see, a strong decline in wine production is recorded among major producing countries, with a few exceptions. And the estimated production volume for Southern Hemisphere is back to the levels recorded in 2016. For example, at 49 million hectoliters, minus 8% with respect to 2019. Let us now see in detail the situation country by country. South America is the region in the Southern Hemisphere that registers the sharper decrease with respect to the production level of 2019. In Argentina, 2020 wine production dropped significantly to 10.8 million hectoliters, so a decrease of 17%, and with minus 13% compared to the last 5 years average, due to the unfavorable weather conditions caused by El Nino. In Chile, with 10.3 million hectoliters, it records a 13% decline with respect to 2019, mainly due to drought. Brazil has an estimated wine production volume in line with the last year, with 2.2 million hectoliters, a level that is 15% lower than its 5-year average production. In South Africa, where drought significantly impacted harvesters, the harvest in 2018 and 2019, wine production in 2020 is estimated at 10.4 million hectoliters, leveling back to the normality. In Oceania, Australia registers a strong decline in wine production volume in 2020 at 10.6 million hectoliters. So that's minus 11% compared to the previous year, and minus 16% compared to the 5-year average. This can be partly explained by a combination of factors that reduce the production volume, the drought, that reduce the yields, the bushfires that took place during the harvesting season, and some of the grapes were particularly affected by smoke taint. In New Zealand, wine production shows an opposite trend with respect to Australia, and for the 4th year in its history, produces more than 3 million hectoliters, precisely 3.3 million hectoliters in 2020, with an increase of 11%. So now, as I said in the beginning of my presentation, I would like to conclude my speech with some insights on the COVID-19 pandemic and the wine sector. The 2020 wine production will enter in a market that is still strongly characterized by the uncertainty provoked by the COVID-19 pandemic. The consequences of the lockdown measures that have been adopted in the great majority of wine producing and consuming countries have had an impact on the wine sector. Of course, the situation differs from country to country, depending on the factors like the length of lockdown measures, the consumption habits of the population, and the elasticity of the substitution between wine and other beverages, and also the relevance of the HoReCa channel or the development level of the e-commerce channel. Overall, we can see that COVID-19 has generated a recession that is indeed having a direct impact and indirect effects on the sector. Not all such impacts will be permanent, but some will last. And the sector needs to anticipate this. Although work in the vineyards and in the cellars had to adapt, and there is there were some supply chain disruptions, the drop in global demand had a major impact in wine production. In fact, lockdown measures not only limited the movement of people and goods within and across the countries, but also led to the closure of the HoReCa distribution channel, which has led to restrictions on the harvest or on the vinified production directed to the market. An example being the green harvesting measures. All this in a situation where the stocks are high and also geopolitical tensions are already shaping the current global economic context. Overall, we can state that the pandemic will most certainly exacerbate the effects on these tensions on the market. Now we will see the impact of COVID-19 on the international trade. If we look at data that are shown here from customs and we compare the first semester of the 2020 with the same period in 2019, we can clearly see a drop in international trade of wine of minus 6.7 in volume and a decrease in value of 12.4%. So after many, and this happens after many years of stable and consistent growth. Overall, it seems that the impact so far has been more negative on value than in volume, and that sparkling wines, that's what we see, are the category of wine that probably suffered the most from the situation. Some of the largest decreases in exports, as you see in the slide, by percentage change in value were the countries that serve as redistribution platforms like Singapore and UK. Due to the stringent international exchange barriers of COVID-19, these countries saw losses of up to 35%. The UK also performed very poorly in terms of exported volume with a 29% reduction. One of the countries that suffered the most in this period was South Africa, with a fall of 24% in value and 40% in volume. France was not far behind, witnessing a fall of 21% in its exports value and minus 10% in volume. It is also worth mentioning the decline in demand of French sparkling wines by 23% in volume and 28% in value. These negative variations are also consequences of the US retaliatory tariffs imposed in October of 2019 and the decline of the Chinese demand. Both factors were already negatively affecting imports before the pandemic. Other European countries, along with France, like Spain and Germany, also saw a negative percentage change in their export volume. Both had minus 11%, partly due to the US tariff implemented on their wines. Italy, on the other hand, which was excluded from such tariffs, did not underperform as largely, with a decrease of 4% in value and 2% in volume. Looking at sparkling wines in Italy, they performed better than in France and Spain, with an increase of plus 4.7% in volume, but with a decrease of 7.6% in value, so reduced prices. Wine being one of the main exporting products of the region in Chile, it took a hit to both in volume and in value, with minus 5% in volume and a reduction of 15% in value. So they reduced export flows and global demand tightening. This was the causes. Moving to the left-hand side of the graph, as you see, we see that Argentina is by far the best performing exporter with respect to the last year in terms of volume, due to the bulk wine exports to Spain and the increased exports of bottled wines to the US. New Zealand was also one of the top scorers on the wine exporters list, both in percentage change by volume by 6% and in value 2%, due to the potential reshuffling in global trades as seen by increasing exports to the US. In imports, let's move to this slide. One of the most prominent countries losing market share in 2020 is China, that recorded minus 32% in volume and 31% in value. These results could be factored by the severe lockdown restrictions due to the COVID-19, as well as the strife geopolitical tensions facing China. The United Kingdom also did quite badly in terms of imports, with a 13% overall fall in value. It should be highlighted that the sparkling wines, there was a 27 fall in value. The United States of America and Germany saw a declining percentage of changes in volume of -1% and -5% respectively, and in value of -8% and -6% respectively. Canada was on the winning end of the spectrum of imports in volume, with an increase of 6% and a value of 1%, thanks to the large increases in bulk and bottled wine imported, especially from the US. The Scandinavian countries like Denmark and Sweden did particularly well in terms of percentage change in imports by value, +5% and 1% respectively, perhaps due to the milder containment restrictions of the COVID-19 and the lesser weight of the HoReCa channel in wine consumption. The current situation exacerbates already existing commercial and geopolitical tensions that has a direct effect increase on tariffs, degradation of international relations, and currency instability. All factors that, among the rest, are negatively affecting international trade. And on top of this climate change, on top of this, we have climate change, which is now a reality that we cannot avoid anymore. The increased frequency of extreme events it's certainly a proof of it. Drought, hurricanes, wildfires are devastating vineyards in both hemispheres. Think, for example, at what happened in California and Australia this year. It will be crucial for the future of the sector to focus all our efforts on the full recovery of international markets. In front of the risk of a global economic recession, without direct actions in this direction, the whole industry will be under threat. This requires, on one side, that governments first recognize the relevance of the sector and its nature of essential economic activity, and then the need to put in place measures that concretely support the sector. But on the other side, that enterprises show also the capability to adapt to be resilient. For this purpose, diversification in terms of products, in terms of markets and the market distribution channels as well, this will play an important role. In all this, I am also convinced that digitalization will be one of the keys of success. Digitalization is an accelerating factor acting in our society. We can see it as a catalyst that makes things happen much faster than expected. We have all seen how e-commerce revealed to be an extraordinary alternative to more traditional distribution channels. This will be the key for the future of the wine sales. Its development has been boosted by the pandemic, and the sector is well placed to keep growing via this channel. To give you some figures that we have gathered from IWSA Drinks Market Analysis, if we look at the world's major economies, e-commerce wine sales growth is in value projected to rise by about 48%. This is 3 times the growth observed in 2019 as compared to 2018. This increase is even more surprising when wine consumption is expected to drop by about 9% in 2020 in all key global wine markets. But this is just an example of the opportunities coming from digitalization of the sector. The wine sector should be prepared, and digitalization has to be incorporated in many ways that involve processes, certification, traceability, sales management services, and all this generates data that is very valuable for all the actors and authorities. And it is for these reasons that I am proud to announce that the OIV is currently about to implement its digital transformation strategy, which consists, among other projects, the creation of an observatory hub that will study and analyze the recent evolution of the digitalization applied to wine sector, and what we call a digital garage, where different digital initiatives and prototypes can be tested. In addition, the OIV Secretariat will develop a data and analytics lab that will become an international center of sectorial data collection and analysis. I hope that all this together with the implementation of our 2024 strategic plan will represent a small but meaningful step towards the development of modern, innovative, and resilient wine sector. I conclude here my speech today, and I thank you all for your attention. Please don't forget to follow us in social media, and I remind you that we will soon publish a new report that concerns the World Organic Vineyard Surface. Now I'm ready to answer a few questions, and please identify yourselves and the media that you represent. So thank you for your attention. And Solange, if you can see if we have some journalists wanting to have more details.
Thank you very much, Pau, for your presentation. Our thanks to all you joining us wherever you're based around the world. I'm delighted to see so many of you here. I can see, for example, that 83 people are joining from Zoom and 86 from YouTube. And I would like to invite everyone to share their question with us. And before we start this Q&A session, a few words on how we will proceed. On the Zoom platform, you can request the floor in order to submit your query directly to the Director General of the OIV. And you can also write down your questions on the YouTube and Zoom chat, and we will share them to the Director General in due time. And as mentioned in both cases, please indicate who you are, and if so, what media you come from. So we'll have maybe a couple of seconds of delay before the first question starts.
Yes, thank you, Solange. Now Daniela Costa speaking. As a matter of fact, I can see already some requests to speak. And we should start with Alexandre Abelin coming from Vitisphère. Alexandre, I will give you the right to speak.
Bonjour Daniel, bonjour à tous, merci beaucoup. Alexandre Abellan, l'appareil, je suis journaliste pour le site Vitisphère. Je posais une question en français. C'était pour savoir si l'OIV avait de premières estimations de l'évolution de la consommation des stocks de vin dans le monde et si avec ces données, notamment de production relativement limitée de vin pour le millésime 2020, s'il était plus envisageable de maintenir un équilibre entre l'offre et la demande ou si une crise se profilait à l'avenir. Merci.
Okay. I think we cannot make guessings at this moment. You know, some of the forecasts are made on assumptions, and assumptions are we can estimate at this moment with what we have seen in the mirror of the car that maybe we would go down with a 9% in consumption, but this would be worse in value, as we have seen from the data that I presented. And we don't know, you know, all the assumptions that we can make are based on present. And so this is difficult to forecast. So Giorgio, if you want to give some more precise data, because I think it's interesting that the people know what we could give as a lower, the economy of wine going maybe down to 15%, something like this. Is that?
Yeah.
So Giorgio can give you on which assumptions we can make these forecasts.
Thank you, Mr. Director General. I'm Giorgio Del Grosso, the head of the statistics department. So to answer your question, much will depend on what happens in the last trimester of the year. As the Director General mentioned below, many analysts expect a drop in sales volumes of about 10%, and between -15 and -20% in value, in at least in major markets. That could be our best guess so far, but I mean, the relatively low production of this year, coupled with measures to reduce yields, to decrease stocks, or to delay the entrance of the markets on the markets of certain categories of wines, will certainly help in terms of equilibrium between the supply and demand. Said that, if lockdown measures will persist in Q4 2020 and in the first trimester of 2021, the situation could worsen. Anyway, it's important to highlight that the situation is very heterogeneous. It depends on many factors, so we cannot. I mean, this is an overall analysis for the worldwide, but then the situation is very heterogeneous.
Thank you, Giorgio. Thank you, Mr. Roca. We are now going to proceed with the participation of the journalist Vicente Escamilla, coming from La Semana Vitivinicola.
Hello, everyone. Hope you are okay. I would like to know how the OIV sees the increase of the protectionism in Russian wine, and what's the situation regarding Russia's claim to have its language made official in the OIV.
Gracias, Vicente. Well, it's interesting to see how there are some regions in Russia that are developing the production. And I always say that it's very interesting that for a country to move into the culture of wine consumption, it is good that they produce wine. Mm-hmm. And that brings them to the club of producers and consumers as well. So welcome, because they are developing on their own. I mean, the former USSR was the biggest producer of wine and of the biggest surface in the world. So that we have to consider this historic part. Of course, all the countries that belonged to that big block, they are now producers independently. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that all these countries have a vehicular language that is Russian. And we are here to provide a service. OIV has a vocation of service and to this sector in terms of that the producers understand the resolutions, the methods of analysis, all the recommendations, and we can get also their return as playing an important part in the expert groups. So the incorporation of Russian language as an official language will facilitate enormously the integration of a group of 7 countries. Integration, participation, and all this. So I am very favorable of the accepting Russian language as an official language in the OIV. And in this case, I hope that the member states will vote in favor of this change. Plus, Russia is paying for all the expenses, so that will not cost anything, neither to the organizations or to the organization or to the other members.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And now we are going to Italy. We have the request from Federico Pizzinelli, the Wine News. Federico, we are not listening to your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, you may go on.
Hello, everybody. The question is, Mr. Pau Roca said the governments have to recognize the value of the wine sector for support them in the next future. What can OIV do about this concern, about to help the producer to convince the politicians, the governments? Thank you.
Okay. We claim that that wine production is an essential activity as the rest of agricultural activity, providing for food. I have to tell you that 50% of, well, 47%, I think, of the vine production, it's not transformed into wine. So 50% of the tonnage, it's also grapes, raisins, juice, etc. It provides for food, okay? So I'm saying that when the Nobel Prize has been given to the food program. And I think we contribute very much to this. So this is an essential activity. The vine and wine production. What can the OIV do? Try to transmit this idea. I think all members, almost all members consider this as they have considered this as an essential activity during the pandemic, especially it was clear the need to consider this in the beginning of the crop that affected the Southern Hemisphere. Unfortunately, South Africa didn't consider in a way as an essential production, the wine production, but I think it was maybe something that needs to be reviewed. but most of the countries of the OIV have considered this as an essential activity.
Thank you, Pau. I believe we have a request for questions from the Agence France Presse from Isabelle Malson. Isabelle Malson, if you are listening to me, I will allow you to speak.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
I was wondering why. How do you explain the fact that Russia and Ukraine are going up, whereas Georgia, Moldova, and other countries from the eastern region are going down? Hungary is also going up a lot. Are these different strategies? How do you explain this?
Probably there are factors, climate factors, but I don't know at this moment. I cannot give you a response, so we will study this in more detail, and we can provide you for a further answer. So I don't want to make any guessing on that.
Okay.
What I want to stress today is that we are still under the same situation on the fires that are happening at this precise moment in California. This is really something that we have to think about, that what is happening in the world, and this is one part is climate change, the other one we don't know, but it's really affecting the whole region. Of course, the crop has already been finished, but things are not good in that sense. And strong cooperation, I think it's very important in this situation. And I thank a lot also our members from Australia that have had this very bad experience, and that they are helping California in terms of cooperation, and they contribute with their knowledge. Any question?
Yes, we have
Maybe on the chat?
Yeah, we have a question. Thank you for answering this question. And we have one from YouTube, which is, when do you estimate we will have a clear regulation on e-labeling? Over to you.
Well, this is, it depends also on the member states. This is a member-driven organization. And that's partly, this is completely on the hands of the group that, the group of experts that is evolving on defining what's an e-label, and how also how digitalization can contribute to change this legislation, and how you can use digitalization to provide for elements in terms of guaranteeing the information to the consumer, because there are many things that have no sense in any label, for example, minimum size or things like this. But stability of the information in the repository where you place the information is very important. So all these things, they need to be solved, and member states need to get to an agreement for that. And I think there is a need, and it's urgent. It is urgent. So the Secretariat is doing its utmost in that sense, in order to have everything, in order to get to an agreement.
great question. I see we have another query coming up, Pau, which is, what are the trends in digitalization?
What are the trends? I always say that we have a new science, which is data science, and that OIV has always been an intergovernmental, of course, but based on science and technology, and it's a technical and scientific organization. So if in the past we have had chemistry, of course, it continues to be important, no? But and then we went into the new contributions of science as genetics, the new contribution of science as ecology in the 80s, and now we are using all this science in order to understand what climate change is, what it's about. Now we have to prepare ourselves to have all this science on data that can be as part of the expert groups of the OIV, and we need to get prepared to that. Now, this is on the analysis of data, which in the sector is very important because we produce a lot of data, but this data is not transferred, or so this is the trend will be exchange also. And we need to work a lot on this, what I said, this digital lab, and at the end try to have EDI transfer of data between member states and easy access to all the sector and to all users. This is the tendency, mainly in data. Now, applications, apps, no, that there is a whole thing going on different contributions, and I think it's important to test them if they are useful. So that's another tendency, to create a sandbox of trials and things like this. We're going to try on that. And then also, of course, very important for us to provide also for the right performance in terms of work platform that really it's on the way, it's adapted to what our experts and our governments say. You see, we have about 1,000 maybe between 750 and 1,000 experts that belong to the system of experts of the OIV. And we need to work together. And this is, there are ways of doing it by digitalization, by the new means and new tools. And this is what we have to implement. This is one of them, but also the ways of having our meetings has been changed. That's another trend. Meeting in other ways of doing it. Like, we need to recover when we can also presential meetings and contact person to person. But at this moment, we can only do meetings that are being done in 5 official languages and with a parliamentary system, which is not easy because neither Zoom, Teams, you name it, they are not adapted, and organizations will have a big work to do in adapting ourselves to that. So, whenever.
Thank you, Pau. We still have 5 minutes left for questions. if you want to participate, you have to raise your hands. If you are not comfortable asking in English, you can also ask in French or Spanish, and our director will answer in English, okay? And for the moment, I see that Patrick Aigrin would like to intervene.
Okay, Patrick.
Patrick, we are not listening to you. Can you activate your microphone?
Ok. C'est
Now
bon
it's
là?
fine. Yeah, oui.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui.
Yes.
Oui, bonjour. Bonjour, monsieur le directeur général. C'était une question peut-être un peu technique, mais vous avez présenté des résultats très intéressants, même s'ils sont partiels, sur l'évolution des exportations et des importations par pays sur les premiers mois de 2020 par rapport aux premiers mois de 2019. Je voulais savoir si on a pu observer une modification des conditionnements qui ont circulé pendant cette période. C'est-à-dire, est-ce que les pays ont plus commercialisé en vrac? Est-ce que les pays qui traditionnellement commercialisaient en bouteille ont continué à le faire, etc. Est-ce qu'on a assisté à des modifications de ça? Parce que j'ai vu qu'il y avait de grands écarts entre les évolutions en volume et les évolutions en valeur. Et je voulais savoir si elles étaient en partie liées à cela. Merci.
Oui, je ne sais pas si Giorgio, tout d'abord, c'est pour les personnes qui ne savent pas, Patrick Aigrin, Patrick Aigrin is the president of our statistic group, so he's not acting as a journalist here, but as an expert, and I welcome him very much because this increases the quality of our debate. But it is important, it is true, we have we have seen that the volume has been reduced, but the value has tremendously been reduced. So this, of course, needs to be analyzed with more detail. It is probably very heterogeneous in different countries and different places, but maybe, I don't know if Giorgio can give you some details.
Thank you, Mr. Director General, and hello, Patrick. So thank you for your question. So as you know, in this period of the year, we normally present just production figures. So this year, exceptionally, given the special circumstances, we wanted to make some observations on the world wine trade. We do not have figures like the breakdown by category, at least at world level. We have it by country. I mean, what we can see is that overall, we expect the bag-in-box to have a strong increase, sparkling wines, a strong decrease. But again, we don't have the figures right now. Another thing that is really interesting is the change in the structure of U.S. imports after they applied their retaliatory tariffs. And so is for this reason, for example, that we see exports from Italy, New Zealand, and Argentina and Portugal going pretty well, especially when the final destination is the US. And at the same time, France, Spain, Germany going down both in volume and in value. But as I said at the beginning, in this period, we don't have figures like breakdown by category. We will do that in our next press conference in April. Thanks.
Thank you, Giorgio.
That's the other thing maybe that could contribute also to that question of Patrick is that we have the impact of the COVID-19 during these 6 months has been tremendous in the on-trade channel. Okay, so this is high value, and these are conditionings that are normally bottles. On the other hand, if you go to the other part of the distribution, which is the off-trade, then you will see that normally the capacity of negotiation of the big surfaces is more, they are more concentrated, so the tendency is to go to lower prices. So not all has to do with, not all the change between value and volume, this ratio that you were mentioning, could also be explained partly because of this shift from channel to channel. Okay.
Thank you, Giorgio and Mr. Roca. And now we still have 2 more questions before ending. I will give the right to speak to José Luis Murcia. Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon, Mr. Roca. How are you?
Buenos días, José Luis. Buenas tardes, porque en España es las tardes.
Buenas tardes en España. Do you think that that after post-COVID, China increase in the next month their importation, another one, or not?
Don't know what to say. That's another way of guessing. I cannot say anything because first of all, we have many difficulties in knowing the data from China. We are always in a bigger delay than with other countries. Plus, they are not members yet of the OIV. We expect them with big expectations that they come into the OIV. We think that China has been particularly hit by the COVID-19, of course, as you know. Everybody knows that. But I don't know if this will change soon or not. No, I think China has also another interesting phenomenon inside of the sector. Also can shift and go to a more mature system of production, and it's going in the right way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to increase in terms of volume, probably in terms of value. And also another factor that we have to take into consideration, it's the difficulties that we have with between Australia and China. So we have some type of parallel situation that European countries have with the USA. There is the same commercial problems between Australia and China. So let's not make many assumptions at this moment. I think we have to stand still.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And now we have the request to speak from Italy, Monica Soma Campagna.
Monica.
We are listening to you, Monica. Monica? Well, I guess it's It's not working. I believe Isabelle Malson has to speak again while we don't have Monica.
Bienvenue, Isabelle.
Yes, bonjour. Rebonjour. For production levels in the next few years, would you say that climate change is your main worries? Because it doesn't show in figures right now in the production, but
Well, in general terms, it's very stable production, but
yes.
I want climate change will affect ways of cultivation. I mean, will affect other things, but well, I don't think that we will see big quantity changes. They are going to be equilibrated, and I don't think that we will see that. The phenomenon of climate change, we have to see it in how, in particular, it affects the way of growing, the different pests that we will have. But I hope we don't have big changes in terms of big changes in figures in production. It will be compensated from one place to another one, probably. And I think it has an enormous economic effect, but not directly by the change in big figures in the world.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, so I think we can thank everybody. We
have just one last question,
Okay.
though, if you don't mind, and it comes from Blake Gray from the USA, which is you report that French sparkling wine exports are way down. Do you have any figures for still wine exports, excluding sparkling wines?
Well, yes, we do. So, Giorgio, if you can give them this data, which I don't have them in mind and by heart.
Yep. So if I got it right, you're asking for bottled wines, sparkling wine excluded. In this case, we have for the first 6 months of the year, percentage change of minus 10% in volume and minus 19% in value.
Okay.
So, Director, I would just like to add before the closing remarks that the files are available on our website, and also the press release and the replay of this web conference will be sent after the conference. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you and goodbye.
Good night and good luck.